Just last week, we in India celebrated our 75th year of independence. August also happened to be the month where India held the UN Security Council presidency. The Prime Minister of India highlighted the need for enhancing maritime security in his opening statement and recommended creating a UN framework to coordinate maritime cooperation. In this episode of Logistically Speaking, I will share with you the strategic issues behind these statements and the worrisome trend of trade colonization. The pandemic exposed India's heavy dependence on China. It came as a shock when we discovered that over 60% of raw materials required for medicine manufacturing came from China. At the same time, the rest of the world also discovered that they are heavily dependent on China for 86 crucial products. This upward dependency can soon translate to monopoly, and monopoly lead to unfair trade, which can eventually end in trade colonization. In the past, solving strategic issues or dispute between nations was through expression of military power. But now, we all know that global strategic issues are determined by trade. Today, trade has become the new power-defining point to control that nations used to dominate other nations. To put it in another way, colonize other nations. Today, China does not require the most powerful army or the best fighter jet or even nuclear power to exert its control over other nations. They draw power from the control over global trade that they have systematically built over the years. The massive trade surplus it has over other countries is giving them the ammunition they need to become the biggest colonial power in the world. Southeast nations, Africa, and even major developed nations have already yielded to China. And without knowing the depth of submission, even India is headed in this direction. Let me give you some data on the slow but consistent colonization that is taking place. Currently, more than 16.2% of Indian imports come from China. The common perception is that we only get low value product from China, whereas the reality is that major chunk of import comprise of machinery, electronics and computer hardware, all of which are vital to the growth of Indian infrastructure, manufacturing and technology. Here is where it gets interesting. Our major export to China is iron ore. This is similar to India exporting cotton to the UK and importing textile manufactured there during colonial era. Just in the last year, Indian import from China increased by 67%, whereas Indian exports have risen by 65%. However, when we analyze this data in detail, we see the trend. Indian export went from $9 billion to $15 billion, whereas import grew from a base of $25 billion to $43 billion. The trade deficit went up by $28 billion, and if this trend continues, our trade deficit this year will be $65 billion. The US failed to understand China's astute strategy of selling this idea of cheap labor, manufacturing capacity, and then negotiating intellectual property while eventually moving jobs and power away from the US and other developed nations. We need to analyze any change in policies, the Prime Minister's recommendations, similar views expressed by Russia and Australia on trade deals with the democratic powers, keeping all this in view. When 90% of the global trade is conducted in high seas, the nations which control the ocean control trade. If the nations which control the seas is also the biggest manufacturing nation, this can be a lethal combination. China made plans to control the seas and logistics of the world through the One Road, One Belt initiative and other strategies like building artificial islands to control the South China Sea, followed by port building in strategic locations like Colombo and Africa. With the blockage of Suez Canal last year, the world has seen how trade can be impacted with just one single mishap in one canal. Now imagine the degree of impact a naval blockage can have. A huge trade surplus without limit and logistic control of the world can lead to trade colonization in the future. Freedom of navigation and unimpeded commerce is critical to maintaining balance and fair opportunity for all nations. India's initiative to bring focus to maritime trade should help in maintaining a stable and enduring maritime environment. Hope this episode was useful to understand the potential hazards of trade colonization. Do share this with your friends and colleagues if you find of value. You can also watch the entire series of Logistically Speaking on your YouTube channel. Thank you very much. See you next week.